Restoration in the Temple of Edfu reveals new inscriptions, paint, and gold. Together with Egyptian conservators, a team of the University of Würzburg has discovered traces of gold leaf, remnants of the colorful paintings and ancient graffiti in the Temple of Edfu. Egyptian temples were not only colorful but also gleamed in glistening gold. Columns, gates, and obelisks had been covered in gold since the beginning of the Pharaonic period. Researchers also know from textual sources that some of the buildings were gilded. In most cases, these were overlays of thicker metal foils made of gilded copper. Their traces can only be seen today as holes in the walls. Thin gold leaf decorations, however, are only rarely documented due to their great fragility. At Edfu, particles of this type of gilding have now been discovered in numerous places on the higher wall areas of the Barque sanctuary. In cooperation with the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, a team from Julius Maximilian's University Würzburg has been researching the formerly colorful paintwork of the stone reliefs in the Temple of Edfu, which was dedicated to the falcon god Horus. The reliefs and paintings were cleaned and consolidated by an Egyptian team of conservators under the direction of Ahmed Abdel Nabi. The work was financed by the Gerda Henkel Foundation. The gilding of the figures presumably not only served to symbolically immortalize and deify them, but also contributed to the mystical aura of the room. It must have been very impressive, especially when the sunlight was shining in, says Dr. Victoria Altman-Wendling, project manager and research fellow in the Horus Behedity project at JMU. The Egyptian restorers removed dust, bird droppings, and other deposits, such as soot, from the sandstone reliefs. In the process, the researchers uncovered the remains of the paintwork that once covered the entire reliefs. In most ancient Egyptian temples, painting is not preserved at all, or only in a few interior areas. The work in the temple's Barque sanctuary was completed this spring. Further analyses of the pigments and the gilding are planned. The multicolored paintings can now provide further details of the scenes and hieroglyphs that could not be identified in the relief alone, elements of the clothing, or the offerings. The craftsmen also used color to correct the hieroglyphs carved in stone. In the painting, we are capturing an ancient quality management, says Professor Martin Stadler, director of the Horus Behedity Project Würzburg. The fact that the gods were completely gilded is particularly interesting. We find this in the textual sources that describe the flesh of the gods as consisting of gold, adds Victoria Altman-Wendling. Another result is the find of dipinti written in the Demotic script. These are a direct testimony of the priests entering the temple. Such personal inscriptions are known primarily from outer temple areas or doorways, and not from the sanctuary or Holy of Holies, where the barque and statue of the worshipped god were located. The prayers addressed to Horus, referred to as proskynomata in scientific terminology, thus provide new insights into the spatial biography of the room, as well as the beliefs and cult practices of the priests responsible. In addition to being the best preserved sanctuary in Egypt, the Temple of Horus at Edfu is a marvel of ancient structural design, with a length of 137 meters, a width of 76 meters at the pylon, and heights ranging from 15 meters to 35 meters. With such grand proportions and its wall surfaces completely covered with inscriptions and pictorial reliefs, it also stands as a unique monument of ancient religion and architecture. Built and decorated between 237 and 57 BC, under the reigns of King Ptolemy III to Ptolemy XII, it contains more religious texts and ritual scenes than almost any other Egyptian temple, some of which can be traced back to the 3rd millennium BC. The Temple of Edfu is an Egyptian temple located on the west bank of the Nile in Edfu, Upper Egypt. The city was known in the Hellenistic period in Koine and in Latin as Apollonopolis Magna, after the chief god Horus, who was identified as Apollo under the Interpretatio Graeca. It is one of the best preserved shrines in Egypt. The temple was built in the Ptolemaic kingdom between 237 and 57 BC. The inscriptions on its walls provide important information on language, myth, and religion during the Hellenistic period in Egypt. In particular, the temple's inscribed building texts provide details of its construction and also preserve information about the mythical interpretation of this and all other temples as the island of creation. There are also important scenes and inscriptions of the sacred drama which related the age-old conflict between Horus and Seth. They are translated by the Edfu project. Edfu was one of several temples built during the Ptolemaic kingdom, including the Dendera temple complex, Esna, the temple of Kam-Ombo, and Philae. Its size reflects the relative prosperity of the time. The present temple, which was begun on 23 August 237 BC, initially consisted of a pillared hall, 2 transverse halls, and a barque sanctuary surrounded by chapels. The building was started during the reign of Ptolemy III Euergetes and completed in 57 BC under Ptolemy XII Auletes. It was built on the site of an earlier, smaller temple also dedicated to Horus, although the previous structure was oriented east-west rather than north-south, as in the present site. A ruined pylon lies just to the east of the current temple. Inscriptional evidence has been found indicating a building program under the New Kingdom rulers Ramses I, Seti I, and Ramses II. A naos of Nectanebo II, a relic from an earlier building, is preserved in the inner sanctuary, which stands alone while the temple's barque sanctuary is surrounded by 9 chapels. The Temple of Edfu fell into disuse as a religious monument following Theodosius I's persecution of pagans and edict banning non-Christian worship within the Roman Empire in 391. As elsewhere, many of the temple's carved reliefs were raised by followers of the Christian faith which came to dominate Egypt. The blackened ceiling of the hypostyle hall, visible today, is believed to be the result of arson intended to destroy religious imagery that was then considered pagan. Over the centuries, the temple became buried to a depth of 12 meters beneath drifting desert sand and layers of river silt deposited by the Nile. Local inhabitants built homes directly over the former temple grounds. Only the upper reaches of the temple pylons were visible by 1798, when the temple was identified by a French expedition. In 1860, Auguste Mariette, a French Egyptologist, began the work of freeing Edfu temple from the sands.